Hi everyone, welcome back to Reading with Raptors. We are coming to you live from outside, at least here in the Twin Cities area of Minnesota. It is a gorgeous, kind of nice, beautiful sky with a couple little fluffy clouds, so hopefully it's nice wherever you are watching from. You get a chance to go outside and enjoy some great weather. So we are out here with one of our resident red-tailed hawks. This is a kind of unusually colored red-tailed hawk for this area. He's actually from kind of the upper Midwest in the Great Plains area. He's a subspecies of red-tailed hawk called a Crider's hawk, or sometimes referred to as a Crider's morph. Kind of two interchangeable, or words that are used interchangeably, but they mean a kind of a specific population of red-tailed hawk that lives in kind of those nice upper Great Plains areas where there's lots of big open fields, lots of snow often throughout the year. So you tend to get this population of red-tailed hawks that kind of all live in that one area, who tend to have these really, really lightly colored feathers. So actually, hopefully he shows up pretty well in the video. It looks like the contrast is a little funky, so hopefully you're able to see those feathers. So very, very light in color. He does have a red tail, like most other red-tailed hawks do. It's just a very light, kind of more tan-ish red. So hopefully see him moving around a little bit. This particular red-tailed hawk, you'll notice that a lot of his perches are very low down to the ground. He lives with us here permanently at the Raptor Center and has now for about 28 years. He lives with us because he is not able to fly particularly well because of a healed wing injury, and so all of his perches have been kind of adjusted so they're a little bit lower, a little bit easier for him to reach and be able to use his ramp to move around. So hopefully we'll get to watch him. Right now he has a nice chunk of rat. There's also a little half of a mouse over here on the ramp where we usually drop his food for him. So hopefully we'll get to see him doing some of that while we read. I thought for a couple of reasons. One, I wanted to get a chance to hang out here with this red-tailed hawk because most people don't get to see this, again, this kind of color morph or subspecies of red-tailed hawk. But also because we've been talking a lot about people organizing in their communities, and I happened to find a book about people who did the same thing about a hawk, which I thought was a very interesting connection to a lot of what people are talking about right now. So I found a book. And I apologize in advance, the Minnesota accent is not kind with this title. It is called Pale Male, which I've been laughing every time I say it out loud because the accent is extremely strong when I try to say it. So Pale Male, Citizen Hawk of New York City. So this is a book by Janet Schulman and illustrated by Meilo So, I think is how you pronounce that name. Meilo So or Meilo So. Apologies if I got that incorrect, but Pale Male. This is another one of those really wonderful watercolor illustration books. You can see here's that red-tailed hawk tail on the cover page, which I just think is fantastic. So, Pale Male. Citizen Hawk of New York City. Here we go. So you can see there's New York City with Central Park and this red-tailed hawk here. I also love, I'll zoom in a little bit, I love the colorful cars. I won't talk about it for too long, but maybe you can all hear one of our barred owls has been quite vocal lately. So if you hear that classic barred owl vocalization, that is happening just a few enclosures down. So if you can hear that in the background, that's what that is. Okay, so beginning, Pale Male. One crisp autumn day in 1991, a red-tailed hawk flew across the Hudson River from New Jersey. He flew over smokestacks, skyscrapers, and ant-like traffic to a rectangular oasis smack in the center of New York City. The hawk soared above Central Park. He surveyed the trees, the small lakes, the tall buildings on all four sides. And with his keen hawk vision, he spotted lunch. So many plump pigeons and rats and squirrels. You can see that beautiful Central Park landscape surrounded by all those big tall buildings. Red-tailed hawks often stop for a few days and sometimes spend the winter in Central Park, but they're shy birds and eventually fly away to quiet farmlands or wooded mountains. This bird was different. He liked what he saw, and he stayed. Birdwatchers in Central Park liked what they saw too, a spectacular red-tailed hawk. He loomed large in the sky with a wingspan of 4 feet, and his unusual coloring, beige rather than dark brown, with breast and belly feathers nearly pure white, made him easy to track. The birdwatchers named him Pale Mail and kept notes on him daily. Pale Mail hung around the park the way a teenager hangs out at a mall. He dive-bombed tasty pigeons and rats at their litter can snack bars. He chased after ducks and was spotted terrorizing squirrels, seemingly just for the fun of it. As red-tailed hawks go, he was a teenager. His brown tail feathers gave it away. These hawks don't get their distinctive reddish-brown tail feathers until they are mature, about 2 years old. So here he is. There's that pale red-tailed hawk looking over Central Park with the city in the background. And here we are chasing down some pigeons while these lucky birdwatchers get to watch. Pale Mail thrived in his new home, and the birders were thrilled when he began courting another redtail. Day after day, they performed an aerial ballet of circling and swooping in unison over the park until, young as he was, Pale Mail won her as his mate. So there is, I love this illustration because you can see that kind of very light coloring on this red-tailed hawk and the more typical kind of darker brown that you see on this one, a little bit more bold in color. In March, the two hawks began building a nest in a tree near a baseball diamond on the Great Lawn. This was the first time that hawks had nested in the park since it opened in 1858. But Pale Mail and his mate were inexperienced builders. Their nest fell apart a month later. Undaunted, the two hawks immediately began building another nest in a tree near East 70th Street. This time, it was not poor construction, but location that did them in. The tree they chose had housed a crow's nest the year before. Crows are natural enemies of hawks, and the crows of Central Park responded with unusual ferocity when they saw hawks building in their tree. Flocks of screaming blackbirds harassed the two hawks every time they left their nest. Finally, Pale Mail's mate began so disoriented that she slammed into a high-rise at East 73rd Street. Witnesses called the Audubon Society. Her wing was badly broken, and she was taken to a hawk rescue center in New Jersey. So here are those hawks doing that behavior called mobbing, where they'll actually kind of all work together to drive away predators. But you can see them chasing off those two red-tailed hawks, one down here and one up here. And then this is that red-tailed hawk being brought to a hawk rehabilitation center to heal up that wing. The birdwatchers wondered what would happen to Pale Mail now. They waited and watched, and the following winter, Pale Mail, now sporting a flashy red tail, found a new mate. In March, they began building a nest. This nest would be different. This time, Pale Mail moved his residence to a ledge above a top-floor window at 927 Fifth Avenue, one of New York City's most exclusive apartment buildings. Bird experts had never heard of a red-tailed hawk with his nest on a building in the center of a bustling city. Maybe Pale Mail wasn't too smart. But soon they saw that this bird was actually very smart. Metal spikes had been embedded in the ledge above the window to keep pigeons away. By forcing sticks and branches between these spikes, the hawks made a nest that could withstand hurricane winds. An ornate cornice, or kind of fancy building overhang, hanging over the ledge provided protection from the elements. The building was just across the street from some of Pale Mail's favorite hunting grounds, and the view of the park from the 12th floor was spectacular. New Yorkers couldn't ask for a better address. Neither could Pale Mail. So this is that very fancy apartment building. And up here in the corner, we have Pale Mail bringing in some sticks. This is that overhang or cornice that they were talking about, that big fancy stone overhang. As spring progressed, Pale Mail and his mate took turns sitting on 3 eggs. Ignoring window washers and wailing fire engines and honking horns below, they sat and they sat. And birders watched and waited. The eggs should have hatched by late April or early May. Finally, in June, it became obvious that the eggs were not going to hatch. The hawks' small fan club was disappointed. There's those 2 red-tailed hawks sitting on that nest with the little eggs. But later in June, their sadness turned to shock when they discovered that the building management of 927 Fifth Avenue had removed the nest. Residents had complained about bird droppings, feathers, and the remains of dead animals, sometimes falling on the sidewalk in front of their building. The wealthy New Yorkers who lived there did not consider these messy hawks to be the kind of neighbors they wanted. So here we have one of the red tails holding on to a pigeon, dropping feathers and waste all over the place. You can see these people are not very happy about stepping in some of those animal parts. Some hawk experts thought that Pale Mail would find a new nest site, but Pale Mail would not be evicted. He and his mate returned in the spring and built a new nest exactly where the old one had been. This time, the building management left it alone, thanks to a stern warning from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, threatening substantial fines. Hawks are protected under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act of 1918. Destroying their nests was a serious violation. And a year later, in April 1995, the hawk's perseverance was rewarded. 3 fluffy white chicks were born in New York City. The hawk watchers of Central Park were ecstatic. From early morning until nightfall, they gathered around the model boat pond to get the best view of the nest. They watched Mom and Dad hawk tend their babies and talked about the chicks like proud new aunts and uncles. Here we have those fluffy little chicks sitting on top of this fancy stone part of that building. And here's a shadow that shows one of the red-tail parents bringing in maybe a delicious mouse or something. Hopefully you can continue to hear those owl noises in the background. New Yorkers on their way to work or out for a stroll wondered what celebrity these people could be spying on with their binoculars and telescopes. The enthusiastic hawk watchers were always happy to point out the nest, and it was the rare person who was not surprised and delighted to discover a family of hawks making a home in the city. News of the hawks spread, and soon New Yorkers who had never been birdwatchers before were stopping by the model boat pond to see what they could see. The hawks were becoming Fifth Avenue's most admired celebrities. Get all these people out watching birds in the middle of the city, all very excited to see these hawks. By June, the hawks had grown almost as large as their parents. Gone was their baby down. Now they had flight feathers. They began jumping up and down in the nest and flapping their wings in preparation for their first flights. In the wild, their nest would have been in a tree with branches to hop down to until they got the hang of flying. The birders were worried. Would these city hawks survive that scary first flight with nothing but cement and asphalt below them? The first fledgling took off with a big hop and then began flapping his wings madly like an oversized sparrow until he landed, awkwardly but safely, on the roof of an apartment building several blocks up Fifth Avenue. The fledglings spent the day half flying, half hopping from balcony to balcony, until Pale Mail gave his brave baby a first lesson in how to fly like a self-respecting hawk. the fledgling watched his father soar over the Metropolitan Museum of Art and circle back with scarcely a flap of his wings. The novice caught on and proudly flapped, slowly, back to his nest, just in time for dinner. Within a few days, all three fledglings had abandoned their cramped nest for the trees of Central Park. So here are those young hawks in their nest and learning how to flap their wings. That brave first hawk learning how to fly around the buildings. There we go, able to jump into the air and flap. And then here's that adult hawk doing that more typical soaring flight that red-tailed hawks are really known for over this very fancy museum of art. Each spring, more and more fans of the hawks came out to watch Pale Mail and his mate renovate their nest with new twigs and leaves. And there was always a great celebration when new chicks hatched. The birders watched the hard-working parents ferry home pigeons, rats, and occasionally a squirrel or a songbird from their well-stocked Central Park meat market. Even after fledglings left the nest, they would stay under the protection of their parents for several months. Pale Mail would always respond to their hungry cries with some meat. He would chase off those pesky crows and let his hawklets know that the blue jay bullies couldn't really harm them. This good dad was once observed helping his hawklets learn to catch rodents by dropping a live mouse near one of them. Over the next 9 years, the hawks would rear 23 chicks. And a CBS News commentator actually nominated Pale Mail for Father of the Year. Life in the big city was good for the hawks. Little did Pale Mail know that his greatest challenge was yet to come. So here's that red-tailed hawk chasing off those pesky blue jays who were probably also doing that mobbing behavior while one of the young hawks looks on. And then of course below are some of those bird watchers. In December 2004, the owners of 927 Fifth Avenue removed Pale Mail's nest along with the anti-pigeon spikes that anchored it. Most of the tenants had been irked for years that they couldn't legally get rid of the hawks. Then in 2003, during a time when many conservation and wildlife laws were being relaxed by President George W. Bush's administration, the Migratory Bird Treaty was changed. It now permitted destruction of nests as long as there were no eggs or chicks in the nest. Hawks lay their eggs in March and the chicks fledge in June. So in December, Pale Mail's nest was empty. The owners of the hawk building were quick to take advantage of the new law. All of New York heard about it in a flash. Television newscasts told all of America. The news traveled abroad in Japanese, French, Arabic, and even other languages. New Yorkers and nature lovers everywhere were stunned. Taking down the nest seemed like such a heartless act coming from people living in their own well-feathered nests. So we have all these news articles. My favorite one says, Fifth Avenue Roost Roust. I always think that those are quite funny. So here is New York City after that. The dedicated birdwatchers and the Audubon Society immediately organized protests across Fifth Avenue from the Hawk Building. Every day, more and more people joined the chorus, chanting, "Bring back the nest! Bring back the spikes! Shame! Shame!" Two protesters dressed as birds urged cars on Fifth Avenue to honk for hawks. Taxis, cars, and city buses honked. Trucks let out ear-piercing blasts of their air horns. Even fire trucks let loose their sirens. Pale Mail circled high above the protesters, silently watching. So we have a lot of people gathered outside to show how much they enjoyed having those hawks there. After a week with hundreds of protesters blocking the sidewalk, with traffic slowed to a crawl, and with constant relentless noise, the building owners backed down. The publicity had been terrible for them. The Audubon Society and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service finally persuaded the owners to reinstall the anti-pigeon spikes and to construct an apron or cradle below the nest to catch the hawks' garbage. The hawks kept a wary eye on the ledge until the spikes and apron were installed and the workers' scaffolding was finally removed. Within minutes, the hawk couple began bringing new twigs to the ledge. They would rebuild their home and start over again. So you can see these people in their apartment looking quite upset about the noise. And them reinstalling that nesting site with the red-tailed hawks watching. The red-tailed hawks had brought great joy to the people of New York, and now the people of New York returned the favor. The hawks were welcome to stay at 927 Fifth Avenue as long as they wanted. They were true blue New Yorkers, tough, resourceful, and determined to make it in the city. New Yorkers loved them for bringing a touch of the wild and a respect for nature to a teeming urban landscape. I love this picture of New York City with all these different birds and wildlife, with the two red-tailed hawks sitting in the tree, and my favorite, red-tailed hawk sitting with his foot tucked. Usually something you see from a very comfortable red-tailed hawk. Pale Mail gave the city another gift as well. In the spring of 2005, some 15 blocks south of Pale Mail's nest, another red-tail and his mate set up housekeeping. They built their nest on a ledge on the 35th floor of Trump Park and Central Park South and hatched 2 chicks. Birdwatchers believe that this light-colored hawk with a taste for high-rise apartments is a son of Pale Mail. Junior is his name. And so the legacy of Pale Mail, the majestic hawk who is different, lives on. Long live Pale Mail. So we have that new nest with those young babies in it on top of another tall building near Central Park and that red-tailed hawk in front of this big city building. So that is Pale Mail, Citizen Hawk of New York City. I really enjoy this one because it talks a lot about what it's like for these kinds of birds that we see a lot of times in our urban or city environments and all the things that people can do to help protect them. So organizing with the community can really work out. So that is Pale Mail. It looks like our red-tailed hawk here has not been quite interested in eating, maybe checking out what we're doing. We've been sitting out here the last couple of days practicing opening the book and flipping around the pages because that is not normally something that this red-tailed hawk would see a lot of in his enclosure. But hopefully I'll get to eating here soon as we keep talking. Otherwise I'll see if I can get a video of him doing that we can post later too. I was going to scroll back and see if anyone had any questions about this red-tailed hawk or Pale Mail, the book. I just really enjoyed all those watercolor paintings. Hopefully you all did too. Also, so hopefully you were able to hear, otherwise we'll see if we can get a video that we can post up too. That wonderful barred owl vocalization you were hopefully hearing in the background, that "who cooks for you, who cooks for you all" kind of noise. That is the noise of a barred owl, so it's the kind of typical noise you'd hear if you were out near, especially some kind of marshy area with some water and maybe a lake or a pond with some nice woods around it is normally where you'll hear those barred owl noises. It's actually also a bird that you can learn more about if you join us for our Meet a Raptor series. We will be meeting a barred owl, actually that barred owl, for the next on Friday and on Monday. So if you're interested in learning more about those programs, there's some posts here on the Facebook page, or you can check out our website, which I think we've linked in the description for this video. So check that out if you are interested in learning more about barred owls, get a chance to see one up close and personal. Yeah, so someone's asking, why is he so white in color? Oh, good. I'm so glad you could hear the owl. Why is he so white in color? So normally what we'll see with red-tailed hawks is of all of the raptors here in North America, they have some of the widest varieties of color, which makes a lot of sense. They are pretty much the top predators in any area that they're in. There really isn't anything that's going to hunt a red-tailed hawk, but they are hunting other animals, and they're hunting a really big variety of other animals, so mostly ground animals, things like your mice and your rats and your rabbits, but maybe also some squirrels, maybe the occasional bird. So what they're usually doing is trying to blend in a little bit with the environment around them so that they're a little bit less obvious to compared to kind of the environment around them. So typically when you see this very light colored red-tailed hawk, he is actually from a subspecies or kind of a localized population of red-tailed hawks who typically you'll see them living in kind of the northern Great Plains. So in North and South Dakota and up into Alberta, that kind of region of Canada. Think big open wide spaces, lots of that lighter colored kind of prairie grassland vegetation, lots of snow for a lot of the year as well. So you tend to see these very light colored hawks in areas where there tend to be really light colored environments around them. Same thing as if you go, for example, further west, especially near your kind of temperate rainforest areas in the Pacific Northwest, a lot of times you'll see red-tailed hawks or who are very dark in color to blend in with those very kind of dark colored trees, kind of cloudier skies, all of that. So you'll tend to see the colors vary a bit depending on where in North America, North and Central and South America you are, to be able to kind of see kind of what camouflage might help them out a little bit. I will also say though, even in this general local area, for example around the Twin Cities, you can see red-tailed hawks who are still fairly light in color or fairly dark in color, just kind of based off of that natural variation that they have. You might also see red-tailed hawks with big patches of white feathers called leucism, where they will have just random patches of white feathers where the pigment, that melanin and that pheomelanin that gives their pigment, that color in their feathers, you'll see hawks that, just because of their genetics, have random white patches of feathers, which is always very interesting. So this red-tailed hawk, he is 28 years old this year. We consider all of the birds to turn 1 year older on January 1st, so he was hatched in 1992. So would have probably hatched around maybe a month or so ago in maybe April or May, somewhere in there. So he has been living here at the Raptor Center for pretty much his entire life. He came in as a first-year bird, so still didn't have quite his adult coloring at the time. So we're fairly certain that we know he was hatched in 1992. And he is with us because of a kind of healed injury to his wing. So it's actually a problem with the elbow. So the elbow is kind of locked in one place. It's not able to kind of fully extend or fully tuck in. So all healed and everything, just isn't able to move the way that his elbow really needs to be able to do that big soaring flight that red-tailed hawks need to be able to do. So we call this bird Casper, if you are familiar with Casper the Friendly Ghost, for those really white colors that he has, the really, really pale coloration that he has, is why we call him Casper. Someone wants to know how sharp his claws are. So like most raptors, his talons are kind of the special word that we call those claws. Those talons are quite sharp, especially kept sharp by giving him these nice large chunks of food like the one that he has. So he has a nice big chunk of rat with all the bones and the fur and all those nice bits. So he'll really need to use his feet. Hopefully, speaking of, there we go. He'll need to use those feet to hold on to that nice big piece of rat. That will help kind of keep those claws or those talons really nice and sharp. Same thing with his beak, having all those bones and all those other kind of parts of that rat in there. That will help keep his beak nice and sharp as well. We also, all of the perches that we have in here, they have either things like AstroTurf or some nice, really natural rope, or a lot of this kind of pea gravel material helps to keep those talons really nice and sharp as well. Since they're so important for raptors being able to hold on to things, we want to make sure that they're staying nice and sharp in tip-top shape. So his talons are quite sharp. They're very good at what they do. Do we ever have osprey at the Raptor Center? I'm gonna try to expand this out. Yeah. So if you are regular, so this is a question from somebody who regularly sees multiple osprey over their house. So yeah, we do have osprey that we will see here at the Raptor Center. We do not have any that live with us as education birds. They typically just do not fare very well as education birds. It's kind of a hard transition for them. But we do see them in the clinic, since we do have quite a good number of them here in the Minnesota area. So we do see them. So around now, I know from most of the webcams of osprey that I've been watching, a lot of them probably have chicks in the nest. I don't think they're quite to the point of having those chicks flying, but maybe if you do have some in the area. They might also still be setting up a nesting site as well. So if you are quite lucky and have an osprey nest either in the works or already established near you, that might be what you're seeing, is either some sort of nesting setup or a territorial conflict between two sets of osprey who are trying to set up in a similar area. So that'd be really interesting to hear more about. So keep an eye out for those osprey. That's awesome. I know for a lot of, if you're in the upper Midwest, we have a lot of spots for osprey up here with all of the lakes and rivers that we have. One or two more questions. How much does Casper eat daily? These are always a tricky question because I always think about it in grams, which is not a unit that a lot of us use in most of our lives. So today he got 55 grams of food. So that was about a quarter of a good-sized rat and about half of a mouse. So probably a good average idea would be if you think of like a good average size mouse that you might see kind of in a house or kind of a city area, he could probably eat about maybe 4 of those mice. Now, this is a red-tailed hawk who's not doing a lot of active soaring around and hunting and braving the elements and raising chicks. So a wild red-tailed hawk would probably need to eat a little bit more than this red-tailed hawk does, simply just because he's not quite as active. So that may vary a little bit. He's also a fairly small red-tailed hawk. He is the smallest red-tailed hawk who currently lives with us in the education department. So typically the females tend to be larger, so they'll need to eat a little bit more food to maintain that as well. So they might eat more like half a rat or maybe 6 mice in a day. So it kind of depends a little bit on the size and activity level, as well as the weather. If it's really nice and warm out, like today, they might not need to eat as much food. If it's really cold out, like in the middle of the winter, they'll need to eat about twice as much as you would on a day like today. So really good questions. Yeah, someone asking a really great question. That was a merlin in the background, that kind of chittering noise. One more question will say, we saw crows chasing what we think was a red-tailed hawk. Why would they be doing this? And that was something we talked about with the Pale Male book. It is a behavior that crows, or members of the crow family, we call them corvids, is the big name for crows and jays and ravens and magpies, corvids. They do this really excellent behavior called mobbing, where they all team up to get rid of raptors or other predatory birds. Because what happens is they can recognize by looking at a hawk like this that that is a predator. They can see those forward-facing eyes that are excellent for hunting. They can see that curved sharp beak. They can see those big impressive feet with those talons. And they know that might be dangerous to us, so let's get rid of it. So what they'll do is they'll all work together to fly at and yell at those hawks, trying to get them to move away. They'll do the same thing with owls quite often as well. That's usually how I can spot great horned owls. So they'll do that mobbing behavior to try to drive those dangerous predators away, so that way they can all rest a little bit more easy knowing that they are not about to be lunch or dinner for one of these raptors. So it's a very interesting social behavior that a lot of these corvids, or your crows and jays, tend to do, which I always think is so interesting to see. Like I said, it is one of the best ways to spot a lot of raptors out in the wild. If you aren't really paying much attention, but you hear a lot of really loud bird yelling noises, usually you are looking for some birds going after some sort of raptor. Somebody has an excellent recommendation for some books. I will look those up. Thank you so much for the recommendation. I admittedly am running short on books that we have here at the Raptor Center, so I've been keeping an eye out for more, so I appreciate that. Thank you. So I think we'll sign off here, but again, I want to make sure that it's all on everyone's radar. Keep an eye on this Facebook page as well as on our website for more information on the online programs that we are starting up offering. Right now, kind of the main public version is the Meet a Raptor series, which again, this Friday and next Monday will be a barred owl. In fact, one of our newer barred owls making a bit of a program debut, which I'm pretty excited about. So check those out, sign up for those. you can join us and ask lots more questions and see them up close. Otherwise, keep an eye out for this. We will be here again next Tuesday for more Reading with Raptors, and keep an eye out for more of those program opportunities. So thank you all so much. Again, I hope you all can get out, do some bird watching of your own. Keep an eye out for those crows and jays making noises. See if you can spot some red-tailed hawks outside, since they are pretty common. So we will see you all next week and hopefully sooner. Have a great time until then. Bye.